none of these founders is allowing their children or the parents to consume red dye number 5.
Get out.
Yeah. And I'm saying that not to just be like flippant.
That was not what I thought was.
No.
The takes get hotter.
The takes get hotter.
Welcome to Quality Matters, where we speak with experts across industries to see how their perspectives can inform our pursuit of high-quality education for all students. I'm Shaka, and this is Caitlin, and we're happy to be your guides for this limited series.
Like you, Shaka and I are passionate about all students having access to a great education, and quality is a driving force behind our work. But what does quality really mean? In an era where parents can customize their child's education, this question is more important than ever.
During each session, we'll hear from leaders in education, technology, business, sports, and the arts. We hope to apply their insights to our pursuit of a great education in the K-12 space.
Join us on this journey to secure a great education for all children. This is Quality Matters.
Well, Caitlin, we are back with another great guest. I'm really excited to welcome Meredith Olson. She is the president and CEO of the VELA Fund. And Meredith, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
You know, Meredith and I have known each other for years, and you know, we've both kind of worked in different at different places and in different roles in the education kind of reform and choice ecosystem. And we're really excited to talk to you. And I'd love to know, like, what right now has you really excited at VELA? What are you up to? Get us caught up real quick.
Oh, wow. So a lot's happening at VELA. Of course, so much is just happening in education in the world right now. I mean, we're seeing unprecedented levels of dynamism just as families are taking true ownership of education. We're seeing the same thing from educators, this idea that there's a personal responsibility, a right and a responsibility to own the development of your family and the development of your children, right? And so that level of energy and enthusiasm is like nothing we've ever seen. And so what that means is that we see there are new education models that are getting launched, new schools are starting, other schools are contracting and they're shutting down, but that level of activity is just at a heightened degree right now. So at VELA, we have been really proud and honored to have been able to support the growth of this movement since 2019. And so what began as an idea in 2017, and it was an idea and a hunch more than anything else, that good people wanted something different in education. And we're just seeing problems, and rather than waiting for a solution to find them, they just went ahead and developed solutions on their own, right? They weren't going to wait anymore. And so we saw this, and we saw what was really striking was that if you looked at like the past several decades, there's been a slow but steady growth in people doing just that, and doing it without any meaningful government or philanthropic support, just doing the thing.
And so now VELA comes in as a philanthropist, and what's kind of the VELA's role in the space?
Well, first we had to convince other people to go along with this idea that, hey, look, there's this growing, emerging space in education. Shouldn't we do whatever we can to help it grow and accelerate? So I spent a couple of years crisscrossing the country just trying to build partnerships, allies, raise money, and that was hard. It was hard. It was really painful. I got laughed at in many audiences, received feedback that this was tilting at windmills, this was foolish and foolhardy work, and that this space was not legitimate, right? Because it was happening in a bottom-up way. It was being led, this work was being led directly by families and directly by educators and not by the experts. Right? And so how could it be legitimate? So fortunately, I was able to secure some funding, and VELA was launched in 2019. And so what began as 3 grants that were issued in 2019 has now grown into one of, if not the largest investors in low-cost private and home education in the country.
That's incredible.
So, the critics, they said, look, you're not even going to be able to find the founders of these novel programs. And if you do find them, you're going to discover that these founders are only serving the wealthiest kids, right? They're not serving a broad cross-section of America. Well, as of now, we've welcomed more than 4,600 founders into our network, and they are largely serving a low and middle income audience. And they're doing it through low-cost private and home education solutions. So then we heard, okay, the pandemic happens in the midst of all this.
Yeah,
we
right.
were lucky because we were up and running. Now, none of us are lucky that the pandemic happened, and we would never wish that on the world. But we were up and running, and we were already writing grants when we found ourselves in March of 2020 in the midst of this horrible global pandemic. And then the critics said, okay, well, all of this interest in innovative education models is a flash in the pan, and everything is going to go back to normal once the pandemic ends, right? Well, that hasn't happened.
Yeah, it's been a generational shift.
Right. There's been a massive sort of societal level inflection that's happened, and we continue to see enrollment patterns affected. Public school enrollment declines. We've seen chronic absenteeism on the rise, and we've seen just almost like a race to the exits. And where are the kids going? Well, they're going into existing capacity in charter schools and in existing private schools, but they're also going into home education and this whole universe of new variations that sit somewhere between home education and traditional private schooling, right? And so that's a space that's just exploded. So then we're like, okay, it's happening. It's not going away after the pandemic. And naturally, the critics are now saying, all right, but unscrupulous founders are emerging, and they're going to actually harm children. Right? They're going to be bad.
Is that just
and
fear mongering, though?
I mean, I think there's genuine care. There's genuine care, concern, and worry that the kids are not going to be okay. At the same time, there's also concerns about the competitive threat of all of these new entrants into the space. And what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for, existing providers? Does it mean they're going to have to, level up? Right? Do something different, like learn and innovate and improve? Or does it mean that they double down on what they know works really, really well? And I think that circumstance is going to be unique to every single provider in education. They're going to have to make a call, right? But what we've seen in terms of the harm done, my goodness, I mean, what we're seeing is that founders are delivering on the academic and personal growth goals that families are demanding. And how do they know? They know because they're earning their trust and they're earning their repeat business.
Okay. So you keep going. Sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. I'm
What
here.
you just touched on was really interesting and something we've talked a lot about, this idea of enrollment serving as sort of a main feedback point for the success of a program or the happiness, satisfaction parents and students have with their program, that they continue to re-engage. Just wanting to confirm, is that something that you are seeing as well as a accurate measurement?
Absolutely. So when in our network, the way it works is you end up applying for a membership to our network, and then you subsequently apply for a grant, a small grant, up to $10,000.
Okay.
Right? A year after you receive a grant, you submit, essentially an update, a year in review of what happened.
Yeah.
It's pretty basic. It's just a check-in, right? We then do reinvestment in a very small number of our entrepreneurs, only because we don't have unlimited funds available, right? So we've got to be judicious. We've reinvested in about 200 of our founders, of that 4,000 total. Okay, about 3,000 have received a small microgrant investment. So this is important. While only about 5% of our microgrant recipients go on to receive reinvestment, 95% are still operating a year after they receive their initial support from us, right? And across our overall portfolio, we've found that more than 80% are continuing to operate since we first gave them a grant. And we've been up and running, like I said, since 2019. And so they're sustaining their operations, and they're doing it because they are valuably serving families who are willing to sacrifice their time and their money for their children's education, right? So they're not surviving based on or sustaining based on government support or philanthropic support.
So this is fascinating, and I'm grateful that you're sharing all this information with us. You talk a lot about, in this, what we just discussed, these critics, which make a lot of sense. That you have to combat them to do the good work that you're doing. I'm sure the founders...
They don't bother me.
Yeah. And that's wonderful.
Honestly, I think iron sharpens iron. So I'm glad. I'm glad that we are just having this vocal kind of cauldron style conversation where we're debating these ideas.
See, I think that's so powerful. And what my question was going to be was, A, how do you maintain that approach? So iron sharpens iron, you sort of answered that. But B, how do you sort of instill this courage and continue to foster this enthusiasm in your founders to do something that's different? And I'm just going to give a quick contextual anecdote.
Right.
We talk a lot on this podcast about sometimes the risks involved with doing something different when you're dealing with a child's education. There's arguably there's no room to fail on a child's education. You want them to have everything they need to have success, but that's inherently not always possible, and you're going to have to do some elements of trial and erring. So you can fight your critics. Iron sharpens iron. What a great mentality. Some of these founders that you're working with who are out there battling the critics themselves, how do you guys as a fund sort of inspire them and continue to keep that motivation and inspire new founders and funders to get into this discussion and get
stay
into
in the
this
fight.
work? Yeah, stay in the fight. Exactly.
Yeah, I would say, so while VELA does provide funding, what we, probably the most valuable thing that we provide is community and resources for our founders, right? And so what is the money is not huge. So when you're talking about a $2,500 grant or a $10,000 grant, that's small in the scope of all of, the expenses that a founder is going to encounter as they're starting up and expanding their operations, right? But what that little bit of funding does is it says, we believe in you.
Yeah, it's a signaling effect,
It's
isn't
a
it?
signaling effect. It
Yeah.
is. And so the effect, and we've heard this so many times. I'm going to read you something we received as gratitude after we gave a grant to one of our founders. It says that, you know what, a major national organization said that I am good enough. Right? And that I am worthy of investment. And that gives me motivation to continue.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. This is not an easy journey. These founders are very brave. They're very courageous. Their critics oftentimes are not elite education experts. Their critics are their family members, their neighbors who are saying, why are you doing this? This isn't going to work. Why would you invest so much time and money? Isn't it just easier to send your kid down the street? Right? So that hits close to home. And so for founders, man, you need a community of support. You need someone to share the highs and lows with, someone to cry on their shoulder and say, oh my gosh, I don't know. I have to get a general liability insurance policy and I don't know where to do it or how to do it. And when you find a community of founders who can say, I've got you. Let me connect you. Yeah. This is what I did.
Yeah.
I had to buy a school bus and I had to get licensed. So this is what I did to make it happen. We've heard these stories over and over and over again. So what we do is we say, we would love for you to be a part of this community. We would love to find a way to show our support and show you that we believe in you. And then we would love to invite you to share with all of these other people. Now, it is not mandatory. This is all voluntary. We talk about how we are a non-coercive, voluntary network of people. And so come as you are, and all of our resources, all of our activities. So we do virtual activities, live, in person. We also have a social community, but it's all, self-service on demand. Consume as you like.
Yeah.
Right? And so what we find is that by having that attitude of openness and voluntarism, we actually get more engagement.
Yeah.
Right? And trust me, I've worked in philanthropy for a long time, and I've experienced more traditional philanthropy, which has all kinds of processes and structures where you have to check the box and you have to do all of these things. Well, those processes tend to breed dependency rather than independence. At VELA, we have we're trying to flip the script on that.
Right.
Okay, so we want to encourage and promote independence as much as possible.
Agency.
That's
ownership.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. But then be your biggest fan, connect you to other people so that you can continue to improve your craft.
Yeah.
Right? And it turns out when you're independent and you're confident in what you're doing, you're not threatened by other people. You don't feel that you're competing with them. You want to learn from your peer down the street, right? Like, what can I learn from you that's going to make my operation better? What can you learn from me that will make your operation better? And so we just see this. It's just a cycle that continues to grow in a virtuous way.
Meredith, are there states right now that you could point to and point, our audience to, our listeners, and say, hey, where we're really seeing some dynamism in one state as compared to another state? Are there a few that stand out as like this is an ecosystem that is allowing founders to thrive,
Right.
At least relative to other states?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts on that.
Yeah.
I've been asked this question many times, right? And when you look at the map, so if we look at the application demand that we've received nearly 10,000 applications since 2019 to join our network.
Yeah.
And if you just look at the map based on the numbers, well, Texas, California, and Florida light up, right, on the heat map. Naturally, because that's where there's most of the kids, right? I mean, this is just following population trends. So then we looked at the numbers a little bit more closely, and we said, okay, what does our application demand look like on a per capita basis? So how many applications have we received in your state per 100,000 school-age students? Right? And there are a couple of hotspots. I can't explain why they are hotspots.
Sure.
But we've received more applications per capita in Washington, D.C. than anywhere else.
Really?
Followed by New Hampshire. New Hampshire people are a little wacky, and they're doing some great work up there. But on average, we've received about 20 applications per 100,000 students. Across the U.S. And then there's almost like, it's kind of wild, there's a tight range. So in most states, we've received somewhere from 10 to 30 applications per 100,000 kids.
So maybe it speaks to something around just people who kind of have a propensity to be in this startup space a little bit too, right? I mean, I wonder if those numbers would track. This is just a hot take, which we don't do enough on our podcast, by the way. We should have the takes get hotter in season 2. I wonder if those numbers, for instance, would track with like small business applications and per capita, something like that.
So in these communities where people identify things that need to be done and take the initiative.
And I think, because I think the reality is that it takes, there've got to be, and maybe you can speak to this, there've got to be some characteristics of founders that that sort of hold a little bit, right? You've got to be willing to step out. You've got to be willing to sort of take the heat, silence the external and even the internal doubt long enough. And I think that that's not 100% of the population.
Right. No, I think you're right. It's interesting. Part of the reason we were looking at the data is we wanted to better understand the interplay between policy and programs.
Okay.
And while we're not a policy organization, in fact, we're neutral on policy. We're a 501c3. We want to be smart and know what's happening in the world, right?
Of course.
And be up to speed. And so we looked at the map of states that have education savings accounts and education savings account style policies. And then also those states that have voucher policies and tax credit policies. And we overlaid that against our per capita application demand on a state basis. There doesn't appear to be much correlation. Okay, so yes, there's strong application demand in states that have education savings accounts and similar policies, but there's also really robust application demand in states that don't. So for example, a hotspot for us is Oregon.
Oh, interesting.
Who would have thought, right?
Yeah, very little sort of public or private, certainly no private choice, but yeah.
Very little, right.
Yeah.
States like Colorado, Kansas, that's where I'm from, and Michigan are just some examples where there isn't readily accessible private school choice funding, and yet we're seeing just a ton of activity and dynamism in those states. And so what we attribute it to, I think as analysts, I love numbers, I'm an engineer by training, we think that when we look at the macro level data, that it's going to tell us something that's going to hold at the micro level. And in many cases that's true. But I would posit this: we don't necessarily live in the macro world. We live in our home communities. So when we see communities that are lighting up, you know what we usually find? We find that there's an individual. In the academic literature, these individuals are called super connectors. All right? And so super connectors are the kind of people who are born and pre-wired to turn on other people to ideas. Whatever their passion is or their idea is, they don't turn on one other person. They turn on like 50 or 100 other people.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Right? And they're just, I mean, this is their superpower, right? We all have our own individual superpowers, and this is theirs. So when we started to see application demand in certain regions, like we'd see a hotspot, we would go and dig deeper, and we'd almost always find yes. So Oregon is a great example. We have a super connector at VELA. We call them community connectors, and she not only was transforming the lives of her own children, but she had turned on and had built a group of individuals so strong in rural southern Oregon, the Rogue River Valley, which there's not very many people who live there. I've been there. It's gorgeous. You should go. Everyone should go. There's lots to do. But there were over 40 founders.
Interesting.
Right? And so
because that she just fanned that flame and kind of
she was kind of the light that inspired people, and she's not the only one. So we started to provide small levels of material support to these super connectors across the VELA community back in, I want to say it was 2022, and essentially said, look, you're doing coffee meetups, you are bringing people together, you're spreading the word. We know that that takes some small out-of-pocket costs. We'll give you some funding. Go keep doing this, right? But it was more not like ex ante, we're going to hire you to do something. It was more like ex post, we see you. Amazing. Here you go. Here's some cash. Just whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Peace be with you. It's just kind of incredible. So we continue to see these activities happening, and then we want to find a way at VELA to be a beneficial partner and to support them as they're happening. So it's to me, it all comes down to the ground game and the human interaction and the relationships that are formed.
Yeah. Love that. So that was a perfect example of just the broad visibility you have to what's going on in the country right now. I have to ask, of all the things you're seeing, is there a model? Is there a personality type like these super connectors or community connectors? Is there one particular experience that's happening right now that you have identified as this is what is going to be taking us into this next chapter, or this is what we need to be seeing more of, or this is what we need to be putting on, stages in bigger places so that everybody can see?
Yeah.
Is there any of those? Really
good question. So I always love to talk about trends, right? And to run through some of the trends we're seeing. As far as what we would like to see, we're neutral.
Yeah, it sounds like you're not very prescriptive that way.
Yeah. We're neutral in pedagogy. We're neutral on ideology and whatnot, and there's a reason for that. So we believe that in order to achieve, a sustainable operation, a founder has got to be laser focused on serving the needs of their community.
Okay.
So of their families and their students.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And if they start, instead of serving the needs of those families and those students in the best way and most optimized way they can, they substitute the values and priorities of a partner like VELA, that's a problem.
Yeah, right.
Right? Because now they've taken their eye off the ball, and instead of serving their customers, they're serving us.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
and
that's
so
awesome.
what our expectation is that we just want to see you and learn from you and see what you're experiencing. And so, I care a lot about the trends because I want to get smarter on what's happening out in the world. Okay, so the trends that we see, again, I talked about how people are self-determined. They are rooted in freedom, right? They are wild, meaning they are courageous and spontaneous, but they are executing their craft with discipline and care. So they are both wild and they are wise. Okay, we love the alliteration there, so I love talking about that. But at the end of the day, what they're ultimately doing is they're fostering these learning experiences that are led by families and by educators, right, who are owning their education. So that's the common theme. And let me talk about how this plays out. So regardless of whether or not you are, operating a very conservative, classical, faith-based program, right? And we have many of those. About half of our portfolio of founders have some form of faith orientation to their practice, and that's really important to what they're delivering. Or let's say you have a very progressive learning model that you're deploying. Maybe it's more akin to unschooling or Waldorf or Agile learning. We also have those within our network. And then everything in between. There's a lot of Montessori models. There's a lot of self-directed learning models. There's also classical and direct instruction models. And then some who do both. Hey, I'm going to do Montessori in the morning, and then but we also do Socratic seminars, and and so you see people creating their own way with this. What do they have in common? And I laugh about this because we have everything ideologically from the far left to the far right. We've got everything sort of pedagogically from the far left to the far right on that spectrum, right? But what do they have in common? I'm going to tell you right now, none of these founders is allowing their children or the parents to consume red dye number 5.
Get out.
Yeah. And I'm saying that not to just be flippant.
That was not what I thought was.
No.
The takes get hotter.
The takes get hotter. So what we are seeing, this is what they have in common. So there's a lot that they have not in common, and that is the strength of our network, because we grow and learn from people who are unlike us.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Okay.
But what do we have in common? It's this idea of education is part of a holistic lifestyle of the development of the human. Education is the foundation for a good and meaningful life. So what does that mean? It's more than just core.
Okay.
It's more than just the academic component of your schooling. It's the development of a healthy human.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
And so most of these approaches, and you'll find this when you meet with founders out in the wild, right? You find that education is not on the side. It's part and parcel of nutrition and health and exercise and how do I fit with the world and the environment, right? And so you find, so this is the trend, right? There's a lot of nature-based involvement in education. There's a lot of time spent in the great outdoors. This is a trend, right? We see this everywhere in the city as well as as well as in suburbs and in rural environments, right? So you might spend all morning doing your academic work, and then literally all afternoon you're going on expeditions, you're going on a long hike, you're growing a garden, you're trying to find your fit in the world. All the while you're eating healthy food. Right? You don't see a ton of processed foods in these environments. That's why I made the comment.
Yeah, I know, it's so good.
Right. And it's because there is this very often, I mean, we see this everywhere. It's this holistic approach to the developing human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Right? That's probably not what you expected.
That is so good.
It's super interesting.
But I'm going to read you. Actually, I'll read you because this will bring it to life. Education as lifestyle. So there's one of our founders is in Magnolia, Texas, called the Hygge Hive. And it's at the Hygge Homestead. And so this founder, her name is Katie, she says, the Hygge Hive is a nature-based microschool in Magnolia, Texas, where children learn through seasonal rhythms, storytelling, and ecological exploration. We're expanding our unique model into digital curriculum and training resources to help families and educators bring their own hives to life. So again, this is the interplay of nature, but also technology. Okay? That's new and unique, right? She goes on to say, we've shown that a mother's vision, a pine wood forest, and a community of curious children can reimagine education without a penny of government support. This is not about scaling a program, it's about planting a movement, one that grows slow, intentional, and wild like the native prairie, never forced, always rooted, one that holds space for children to be seen, mothers to exhale, and learning to become a shared sacred ritual again. Okay, so this is the ethos that we're talking about, right? And it's hard to describe without having a first person narrative of
And you
it.
can hear the person behind that.
Oh, you
I mean, you can
absolutely
almost see
can.
it, what they're talking about and who they are.
You can see it, you can feel it, and when you walk into an environment like this, you immediately think, "Oh, wow. What a wonderful place to be a child and to be alive."
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Now, did any of us experience a childhood and an education like this? I mean, I didn't.
No.
No.
Right? I mean, I went to the traditional public school down the street, and it was great, and I value that experience immensely. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But man, am I excited for the kids who get to experience something like
You're doing
this.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Meredith, you've given us a ton to think about
Yes.
and break down. I mean, thinking about what quality looks like in these environments, and you know, at Huga Hive and really around the country, I think is pretty encouraging to see how these new models are growing. Really appreciate the work you're doing at VELA, and appreciate you joining us on Quality Matters for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right, Shaka, I loved that conversation with Meredith Olson from VELA. Another perfect example of like just passion and enthusiasm being inspiring and sort of invigorating. And before we get started, I just have to note, to me, it was so clear that her leadership and her perspective is transcending through their community, through her team. And I was just so impressed with that. Iron sharpens iron was one of the things that she said at some point in the beginning of our conversation. That was her approach. Like, she says, you know, the critics don't bother me, bring them on. I actually think it's a healthy dialogue to be having. I think it makes everybody better. And I relate to that approach. That response really resonated with me, because I think so many people need that approach. Like, we should be engaging in dialogue and in discourse with people that don't agree with us, and we should be doing it respectfully, and we should be doing it with the intent of making ourselves better through learning about other people and through learning about their thoughts. And she had such conviction in sort of encouraging her community and all of the different, awardees to be remaining individualized and focused on the people that they're serving and what they're trying to build. And, you know, I just thought you could really see how her leadership and her approach is fostering a really unique and powerful movement.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to that point, one of the things that she mentioned that stood out, she said that she really wants the leaders to stay focused. And that's easy to say, but what I appreciated is she said, we want them to stay focused, so we don't want them starting to alter their mission based on what she as a philanthropist was trying to do.
Right.
So she didn't want the tail to wag the dog.
Yes.
And I really appreciate that. Anybody who's been in the nonprofit sector, you know, knows that big grants are sometimes a blessing and a curse, right?
Yep.
Because you get them and we're so appreciative of the support. But sometimes those come with a lot of reporting requirements, and you're reporting on things that are hard to measure, or that you wouldn't even have measured but for receiving these funds, and it can alter your mission.
Totally.
And if you alter the mission of a startup microschool,
You change it.
you're just changing it, right?
Yeah.
And you're she's not trying to start a bunch of Meredith Olson schools or a bunch
Right.
of VELA schools. They're trying to get, they're using small dollar amounts to have outsized impact. And I really appreciated that. I thought that it was a great way to think about why this movement is taking off. She talked about parents really appreciating that they have the right and the responsibility to kind of own education. And I love that she talked about both sides of that, because I think we hear a lot, certainly when we talk about education freedom, that's the right side. But the responsibility side is, okay, how are we going to be engaged and really own this, and not just abdicate responsibility to, the teachers and to the district, whatever, but still stay engaged, even though, as parents, you're busy people. whatever. So right and responsibility, that really stood out.
Yeah, I agree. I thought I liked that approach too. I think that's powerful. It's continues and perpetuates this notion of ownership and accountability and this idea of, you know, agency. That was huge. And so in so much of what she was sharing, you know, continued these notions and this thread of agency and accountability. You said something, small grants, which I thought was so interesting, because one of the things that she said was actually, you know, the money is good, but these are small. They're not going to totally revolutionize maybe how someone operates.
Yeah.
But the best thing that they are doing, and the most powerful thing that they're doing, is they're creating community, and they're creating camaraderie, and they're giving people who are doing something really difficult, which is this, they're taking the initiative, they're doing something new, they're building something from scratch, and they're giving them sort of compatriots in the I was going to say fight, but I don't know that that's the right word, in their engagements and on this journey. And they're letting other people walk together with those that are facing similar challenges. And, you know, I believe fully in the power of a team, and what they're doing is they're building it.
Yep. No, I thought those the network, the power of the network sounds like it's really impactful and beneficial to the founders. That dollar amount as kind of a signal to other folks, and that, you know, it's a validator, right? If you've ever started something, and you and I have both started lots of projects, right? I mean, we can probably think back to even with this podcast.
Yes.
Those first emails that we got where somebody was like, "Hey, really enjoyed that episode."
Yes.
Oh my goodness, it's like you want to frame it, right?
Yeah,
it's
right.
Like when business owners put the first dollar on the wall.
Yeah.
It's because
it means something.
It means something. It says it, you know, it validates your idea, and it really fuels you to continue. And I think that's really important. Okay, now here's where I want to kind of raise a question.
Yeah.
She said that many of the founders are doing this absent big grants, absent government funds. And I can appreciate that from a startup perspective, but I would want to know, well, what's the tuition at these? I don't know if there's some average number, so I'd love to get some data on that, because like, are these schools, I mean, she talked about lots of the schools are serving lower income families.
Right.
And so to me, that's really important.
Yeah.
But I would love to know, how are families affording tuition? So why not participate in choice programs? And maybe what she was meaning is like direct government grants.
Yeah.
But to me, a choice program, an ESA program, for instance, those aren't government funds. It's coming to a family and then coming over.
And then going over. Right.
And so so maybe, you know,
that's
that would
a
be
good distinction.
That would be some follow-up to do with Meredith, maybe.
For sure.
Because, you know, I think I want all these options to be accessible to as many people as possible.
I agree.
And the dollars do matter from tuition standpoint.
Well, that's exactly right. What do you think, in our past conversation with Kelly Smith, how would he describe sort of his funding for those micro schools? Like, would he say absent of government funding? Because to my knowledge, they're not getting, you know, big government grants. And
no, I don't think they get government grants, but a lot of the families are participating in ESA programs.
Right, and that's where it's coming from.
Correct.
In Arizona and Florida.
Correct.
So that could be an interesting conversation to sort of hear, you know, what's the language those two individuals doing really impressive work would be using to describe their programming.
Right.
And is it the same?
Yeah, because it could be because I think the mission and the orientation is pretty similar. It might just be a difference in language and how that gets used.
Right.
Yeah.
Which just goes back to how important language is, and how, you know, being able to characterize and sort of communicate the work you're doing and the impact it's having, which leads me to the quote that she read at the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
I loved that.
From the Hugh Hive. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just thought that was so powerful, because it was so sincere, and there was so much in that quote that you could unpack: the gratitude, the enthusiasm, the initiative taking, the innovation, merging nature and exploration with technology.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have to choose between sort of what things used to look like and what things are going to look like. You actually can blend the best parts of both into these new school models.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of that here at the Emerging School Models Conference, how people are starting new things and taking bits and pieces from other working models to create something that's meeting the current needs of different students.
Yep.
And I just thought that quote was a great one to share and to
I
end
agree.
on.
I think it's really inspiring to hear the stories of these, the micro school leaders, really school leaders, but, we're at this micro school or emerging schools conference, and so we're hearing a lot of it. It's exciting to think about educational experiences that are so different from the one that I had. And mine worked in many ways, but I know it wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't as customized and as tailored just to me and to my needs as it could have been.
Yeah.
And so to think that there's now, hundreds of thousands, millions of kids who can access something like this is really cool. I will say one last thing, and she was talking about this. She was telling us a little bit about trends. She was talking about how many of these school leaders care about just human development. And the wild and wise was a great frame.
Yeah, I loved that.
But you caught that last thing that she said. We said, what are some trends that you see? And she said, none of the founders are using red dye number 5.
I know.
And
we can't break down without discussing that.
I know. And so I just want to say directly to the camera, you will have to take red velvet cake from my cold, dead hands, because I will never give that up. So I don't care what chemicals are in it. And that's facts.
Honestly, it had me thinking, I like to consider myself a pretty conscious eater. And I'm like, if all of these parents and these communities are able to use the discipline to somehow make that possible, what do I need to be doing differently? And perhaps it's cutting out my red velvet cake, or I don't know, whatever I can't think of what it is.
It's good that was not the litmus test to get into education reform, because I don't know if I would have had the discipline to.
I wouldn't have passed, but maybe I'll take a new step, a new perseverance towards trying that.
Yeah. All right. So that's going to be the question for the audience. Have you given up red dye number 5 yet?
And are you going to?
All right. It was another great conversation. Thanks for having this chat.
All right. Talk to you later, Shaka.
Right, see ya.